This is an event that we had been planning for some time now. Ultimately, it got postponed last year because of the pandemic, and now rescheduled and reimagined in a Zoom format here at the end of the semester as an opportunity for us to celebrate all of the members of our department who received Indiana University Bicentennial Awards. We were quite fortunate to have at least seven of our family members receive these awards from the university. And today we're going to spend some time talking about their great accomplishments and otherwise celebrating their great achievements and contributions to Indiana University. I thought if each of our seven award recipients will be introduced by a member of our department, kind of giving an introduction to the work they did. And then we might ask each of the medal recipients if they'd like to say a few words to the group to give them that opportunity. As wonderful it is to see everyone here, I also want to send thanks out to our office staff for putting together this event, advertising, flyers, making all of this happen. Michelle, Angus have done a wonderful job for us this year, and their efforts should certainly be recognized and appreciated. Excellent. And if you might, I thought as a way of getting started, I know this sounds strange, but in a department that celebrates design and craft, I thought it might be worth a slight digression. And if you'll indulge me just 5 minutes of your time, there's actually a really interesting YouTube video on the design and creation of these medals that I thought actually might be worth our time to kind of frame the medals, where they're from, their history, the meanings behind them, and give us a better sense of how Indiana University is using these medals to celebrate the achievements of faculty, staff, and others. So if you'll just indulge me this 5 minutes, I actually found the video quite interesting, and I hope you do too. I'm just going to share my screen here and cue it up. I thought that was an interesting way of seeing how those medals were crafted, and the materials in particular that they were salvaged from were the old bells used in the student building up until 1990. That fire at the student building is still a major component of firefighter lore here in Bloomington, as several of my colleagues worked that fire and will tell you the story of that fire in great detail now, 30 years later. What a fitting way to salvage those bells and to turn them into an incredible piece of history to celebrate achievements on the bicentennial anniversary of Indiana University. So without further ado, now we might begin to talk about our medal recipients. I'll ask each of the presenters to kind of take the floor for a little bit to perhaps capture the contributions of our award winner. And then after that, I'll perhaps give the medal recipient the opportunity to kind of say a few words should they like. There were 7 award winners, as I mentioned earlier. They are Henry Glassie, Jon Kay, Moira Marsh, Portia Maltsby, Bruno Nettl, Ruth Stone, and Dick Bauman. I also want to mention that Ilhan Bashkas was a recipient of this award as well. He was previously celebrated last year before the pandemic hit. For that reason, he wasn't included. There are perhaps others that I'm unaware as of yet who received this medal. And if that's the case, please, I hope they do not take any offense. We weren't given a full list of all of the medal recipients. And so there may in fact be folks out there who have a medal on their desk right now and wondering why they aren't being discussed today. And if that is the case, please let me know, and we'll certainly do our best to make that right. Our first recipient is Henry Glassie, and I'll ask Ray Cashman to take the floor to talk about his contributions. Ray?
Great, my pleasure. I assume you can hear me okay. So, Henry Glassie, college professor emeritus, richly deserves this Bicentennial Medal in recognition of his long and distinguished service to Indiana University. But let me begin my praise poem for Henry in the near present. Earlier this week, I was teaching, as best one can via Zoom. Look, even in the before times, even in the best of times, it can be kind of tricky to get a class full of undergrads and a handful of grad students to read a 500-page book. But it's a heck of a lot easier when that book is Henry Glassie's The Stars of Ballymonroe. So I was pleased and I was gratified on Monday when about a half dozen students stuck around on Zoom after class just to say basically, wow. Call it art or call it folklore, but this is what it is, a momentary fulfillment of what it is to be human. Wow, they said. More or less spontaneously, my sticking around students started trading favorite passages, ones we had discussed in class, ones we hadn't. One quoted, "I take my stand doing what I can to undermine the prejudice held by thinkers to the right and thinkers to the left against the rural poor." And then he declared simply, "Yes, this book came to me at just the right time." Another chimed in, "Go ethnography. To, quote, understand the world as it is understood by others on their own terms through their own creations. More of that, please," said the student. And then back to the first student, "Damn," she concluded, "when I grow up, I want to write a book like that." Now, it struck me at the time, and it sticks with me now, that her words were very similar to the ones I used way back in the early 90s when I first read Passing the Time in Ballymonroe. That's the book that steered me to folklore studies. And now for some of my students, Stars has become their book, their moment when the path ahead is illuminated. It turns out, I don't know if you know this, but it turns out Henry has actually written more than just those two books. Like a lot of books, like 20 books and counting. So I'm going to stop goofing around and I'm going to get to what is basically an overly brief summation of the many works and miracles of Henry Glassie, IU Bicentennial Medal Award winner. Henry earned his BA in anthropology at Tulane, his MA in Cooperstown graduate program, his PhD in folklore at the University of Pennsylvania. And after serving as Pennsylvania's first state folklorist, Henry joined the IU Folklore Institute in 1970. Later to return to Penn to become chair and professor, and then to return to IU as a college professor in 1988. Continuing the work that he began as a state folklorist and as a civil rights activist, Henry's been committed to public folklore practice throughout his career, building museums and exhibitions, doing historic preservation work, participating in folklife festivals, working on applied projects throughout his career and around the world. His early monographs, Pattern in the Folk Material Culture of the Eastern United States and Folk Housing in Middle Virginia, employed both historic geographic and structural analysis in the comparative study of artifacts. These two works proved to be transformational for democratizing the written record, for illuminating both deep continuities and perhaps disquieting changes in cultural history. But Henry's contribution doesn't end with elevating material culture studies in American folkloristics. I often began introductions to Henry with the observation that he has conducted ethnographic fieldwork on every continent except for Antarctica and Australia. And his singular commitment to the inductive as possible co-creation of knowledge through the intimate engagement with others, this has informed Henry's scholarship to the day. Particularly in his performer and artist-centered ethnography, his monographs on the artist Prince Twin 77, the musician Ola Bell Reed, the potter Daniel Johnston, Henry plumbs the depths of the mutually constituting relationships between the individual and tradition. That said, while Henry has been closely associated with both performer-centered ethnography and with material culture studies, much of his work also illustrates the benefits of a humanistic comparative method. Books such as Material Culture, Vernacular Architecture, The Potter's Art, The Spirit of Folk Art, these boldly make connections and elucidate patterns over huge swaths of time and space. This almost pansophical comparative perspective both derives from and in turn informs Henry's ambitious studies of art, tradition, and culture at the scale of the nation state. With Brazil in sacred art, written with Pravina Shukla, in Turkey with Turkish traditional art today, in Bangladesh with Art and Life in Bangladesh, the latter two books having been recognized with awards from the Ministries of Culture of Turkey and Bangladesh, respectively. And there are still books I haven't mentioned: All Silver, No Brass, Irish Folk Tales, Irish Folk History, nor have I mentioned that Passing the Time in Ballymaloe, my early favorite, won the Chicago Folklore Prize and the Haney Prize in Social Sciences. To these prizes, we could add about a dozen more, but two prizes stand out for lifetime achievement. In 2010, Henry earned the American Folklore Society Lifetime Achievement Award. 2011, Henry became the only folklorist so far to receive the Haskins Prize for Lifetime Humanistic Scholarship from the American Conference of Learned Societies. And then, of all things, Henry and his brand of ethnographic research became the subject of Pat Collins's documentary film, Henry Glassie Fieldwork, which premiered at the 2019 Toronto International Film Festival and won the 2020 Best Irish Documentary at the Galway Film Fleadh. So yeah, I suppose it's not too far of a stretch to see how Henry has been awarded a Bicentennial Medal by the university he has served for the better part of 4 decades. Congratulations, Henry.
Ray?
Yes, sir.
Yep, I love you.
Love you too.
It was too much, but I love you.
You're too much.
Congratulations, Henry, and thank you, Ray, for a wonderful introduction. Our next recipient is Dr. Jon Kay, Associate Professor of Folklore in our department, and he is going to be introduced by Jason Jackson.
It's an honor to be a part of the gathering today and to see us recognizing so many incredible colleagues. And special pleasure to speak to John's work. Our colleague Jon Kay was doubly honored during the IU Bicentennial. Of 24 Bicentennial professors recognized university-wide, John was one of only 2 named from the College of Arts and Sciences on the Bloomington campus. Across all of IU, John was one of only 3 colleagues then holding non-tenure track appointments to be so honored. It was a pleasure to be one of John's nominators and to see him recognized so appropriately. In that context, I wrote about how the diverse heritage of Indiana is John's special concern, and how no one knows it better or is more effective at sharing it with many different Hoosier constituencies across many different modes of public and scholarly engagement. How do I know that John would be such a great representative of the university around the state? Because he's been doing just this thing as a member of the IU faculty since 2004. I've watched him do it firsthand in community halls and public libraries, in state parks, and at the Indiana State Fair, since I also joined the faculty in that same year, 17 years ago. John came to IU from great success as a public folklorist in the state of Florida. That role and earlier ones in public folklore prepared him well to lead Traditional Arts Indiana, our state's official folk and traditional arts agency. Despite facing near constant institutional shifts and reorganizations, John has thrived at IU, and TAI has thrived with his leadership, much to the benefit of the state of Indiana and IU. With the involvement of undergraduate and graduate students from our department and remarkable partners from around Indiana, John leads a sophisticated research and outreach program focused on the vernacular culture of this state's varied communities. John gives everything he has to the work of researching Indiana cultures and to developing programs that serve large audiences and diverse constituencies. John connects with thousands of Hoosiers each year, deepening understandings of the changing nature of life here, helping strengthen communities and vernacular cultural life, assisting artists and tradition bearers, teaching students in and beyond the classroom, and mentoring some of the best public folklorists and applied ethnomusicologists in the nation. While I might be inclined to attribute some of his success to his being a Hoosier connecting to other Hoosiers, I've seen him do the same effective work with audiences from New Mexico to China, and I can vouch for the greater than Indiana nature of his research talents, having done field work with him on the other side of the planet, and from watching his rise over the past 5 years to become a leading voice nationally and internationally in the area of creative aging research and practice. I had hoped that John would be chosen to be a bicentennial professor, but his bicentennial medal came as a happy surprise to me. It's an additional honor that is well deserved. These medals, and we saw them being made a moment ago, they celebrate those who broaden the reach of IU around the state, nation, and world. As I've already suggested, this is something that John does and does vigorously and well every day. As a producer of documentary videos about makers in Indiana, his productions consistently garner thousands, regularly tens of thousands of viewers. During the State Bicentennial, his exhibition and program series on Indiana folk arts reached hundreds of thousands of Hoosiers in richly meaningful offline ways. That project was co-planned and co-produced not only with students from our own department, but with a team of Hoosier craftspeople that represented not just the cultural diversity of our state, but its social diversity as well. It is one of scores of major initiatives that John has led within the TAI context. I note in this regard that John is also among the university's most consistent and successful grant writers, securing extensive funding that has made so much good work possible. Online and in person, in the classroom and around the state, it's nearly impossible to take full account of all of the work that John has done since joining us. Shortchanging his TAI work, I'll just note that John's rapidly expanding profile beyond Indiana is also noteworthy. His books are being taught around the US and internationally. Folk Art and Aging is the best-selling as well as most frequently downloaded title in the IU Press's Material or Vernacular series. John's article on Brown County in the journal that I presently edit is the third most popular work overall out of an even 400 works published so far over the title's history. I could go on in this way, but I know you know the story I'm evoking. John is a valued colleague and a very deserving recipient of the Bicentennial Medal. Like the other colleagues whom we honor this afternoon, John is, as the medal guidelines describe, a model, quote, for future students, faculty, alumni, and organizations to emulate as IU enters its third century, unquote. As we celebrate John, I want to also acknowledge that the hard work that John has done for our department, our state, and our discipline would not have been possible without the patient support of his family. The life of a state folklorist is not easy, and living with one can be vexing at times. Thankfully, Mandy and Zelton have supported John in ways that the rest of us can only guess at. His success and his work on behalf of all of us is directly related to their support. So congratulations, John.
Thank you very much, Jason. You're just always so eloquent with your words, and I have to say I'm completely at a loss and humbled by this to be included in such an amazing roster of scholars. I feel as Wayne's World characters would say, I'm unworthy, but I'm really thankful to all of you for giving me this opportunity. And I should say that in accepting this honor, I'm not accepting it for myself, really. I'm accepting it for everyone who's given me an opportunity, and that includes my professors, it includes my family, but also more so all of the artists with whom I've sat down with and learned something from and got to share. I realize that all of my successes are built on their shoulders constantly, and I know you all know that better than anyone. So thank you to all of those artists out there in the world. Thank you.
Congratulations, John. Our next recipient is IU librarian and folklorist of humor, folklore collections librarian, former president of the BFC. I could go on, Moira Marsh, who will be introduced by our own John McDowell.
Okay, yeah, thanks. It's nice to be involved here. When I first heard that Moira got this award, I assumed it was for her recitation of Cinderfella, the monologue that she does. If you haven't heard her do this, maybe we can get her to perform it a little later on today. But then I thought, well, there are some notable features of Moira's career that could also be responsible for this honor. Moira and I go way back. I remember when she first came to Bloomington. She was Moira Smith then, but thanks to a friend named Gil, she's Moira Marsh now. And she came to us knowing Latin and German. Honestly, it was her English that was slightly suspect, but and we figured out, okay, she's from New Zealand. This is a Kiwi accent, and it didn't come out as much in her writing. That was fortunate. But Moira has a deep connection to our department. After all, when she was a student here, she won the Dorson Dissertation Award, but then went on to become a contributor to the Journal of Folklore Research, and eventually graduated to edit the Journal of Folklore Research. So she's deeply embedded in what we do as a department. So she followed in the footsteps of Polly Grimshaw, our dear beloved departed colleague, over to the library. And as Dave said, there she became a collection manager and liaison, librarian for anthropology, folklore, and sociology, a specialist in anthropology, archaeology, ethnomusicology, folklore, and sociology. I've been meaning to say to you, Moira, you need to expand your horizons a little bit, but we can pick that up another time. Importantly, and again, following in Polly's footsteps, Moira has kept alive and manages the Modern Language Association folklore bibliography, which is a very ambitious and very important project. And so this has been a significant feature of her portfolio over at the library. In the realm of scholarship, Moira is very accomplished, and she's published in the Journal of American Folklore, obviously the Journal of Folklore Research, and many other places. But there's a thread I'd like to follow from her dissertation, which I was involved in, and running all the way through to the book that she published, Practically Joking, with Utah State University Press in 2017. And so her dissertation is, I think I've got the name of it written down here somewhere. Where did it go? The Ritual Humor of Students, Capping at Victoria University, 1902 to 1988. So capping, it turns out, these are mischievous tricks that students play around the time they're about to get out of town. So maybe it's safe to be mischievous. And I remember one of them very well. And I guess the students who were finishing up got a hold of some stationery from the sanitation department or whatever. And they sent out notices to many citizens of Wellington that they needed to show up at 9 o'clock in the morning at the post office with urine samples, and so people showed up, and of course, there must have been some hilarity as well as a good deal of anger, at that moment. But that thread continues, as we see in Moira's book, Practically Joking, which is really a wonderful book. She runs through many varieties of practical jokes. She comes up with a theory of benign transgression, although I think there's some malignity in it at times as well. She shows how there's a performance kind of sequence, and there's a sort of critical evaluation, and then even a legendary aftermath of many practical jokes, and really comes at it as a kind of a folk art form. So very important contribution to humor studies, to folkloristics and beyond. Well, briefly, everything here is brief. Moira, as Dave mentioned, also became president of the Bloomington Faculty Council. And I really remember some of the communiques that came out, and Moira always adopted a very earnest, but also, let's say, amenable kind of a tone in that role. And that's really emblematic of Moira's, I would characterize her as an active citizen of the university, of the city of Bloomington, and really, I guess we could say, of the world. Well, I'm proud of Moira for all that she's done and for achieving this particular recognition. It's a well-earned recognition of her contributions to IU and through IU to the world. So well done. Congratulations, Moira.
Thank you, John. That's really very sweet. I should just say that I'm very glad that our august institution saw fit to give bicentennial medals to all of the presidents, faculty presidents that are still in the land of the living, because it's a recognition of shared governance, how important that is. And so I see that really this particular honor is really more for just how well IU does shared governance, because not everybody does it, believe you me. So those of you who go on in academia, just remember those two words, shared governance.
Congratulations, Moira. Our next medal recipient is Dr. Portia Maltsby, legend of Black music research, founder of the IU Soul Review. I could go on and on. I hope Alisha does. She's with us here today, Professor Emeritus of our former chair of our department, all of these things. And she's going to be introduced by our own Dr. Alisha Lola Jones.
Thank you so much. I'm gonna take a cue from McDowell and just start by personally saying it's such an honor to say a little bit about Dr. Maltsby. I can recall the first time I met her. She may not remember it, but I was fangirling. I met her at IASPM in New Orleans. I was so nervous. I don't even know if she noticed how anxious I was, but I said hi. She said hi back. I couldn't believe that she spoke to me. She even said, let's go grab a bite. And in those subtle moments, it's probably her everyday interaction, but for a graduate student who was meeting her hero, it meant everything. And to this day, I can't even make sense of how to say of a hero as much as I could say, especially because she has become one of my most generous friends. And your work is still speaking, Dr. Moultsby. A couple of days ago, I returned to my alma mater to lecture, and I asked some of my old professors what they knew of genres in Black music research, and there were crickets. They didn't know much about our music. And I showed them your chart, the chart that has become synonymous with a pedagogical move of plotting out just how much there is there in African American music research. Your work is still speaking. Your work, your public facing work, and you as a culture bearer still means so much to folks like me who are music ministers like you are. I know you wouldn't call yourself a music minister, but that's how you functioned. But people who understand that there is never a separation between community and the ivory tower. And so I salute you in a way that is not often common in these quarters, as a Black woman saying to another Black woman, thank you for in breaking for us. And in the spirit of the sisterhood that I have observed as indicative of ethnomusicological research associated with IU, I actually want to draw from a fellow recipient, Dr. Ruth Stone, who so eloquently gave a bird's eye view into your life when she penned a bit about your bio. And so I'll read Dr. Stone's work. Portia K. Maltsby has devoted herself to Indiana University for 42 years in an array of capacities. A quintessential Renaissance faculty member with endless energy for exploring the new and unknown, she's left an indelible mark on the institution. From ensemble director to department chair, academic author, forensic ethnomusicologist, and archive founder and director, She has focused her energy on the performance, research, preservation, and education of African American music and culture. Her academic journey began in Florida, where she lived as a child and teenager. Her mother made sure that she started every day with her piano practice before she went off to school. That practice bore fruit when she moved for her BA studies in piano performance to Mount St. Scholastica College in Kansas. She obtained her PhD in ethnomusicology, specializing in African and African American music at the University of Wisconsin. Even before she had completed her doctorate, Dr. Herman Hudson recruited her to Indiana University to found and lead the IU Soul Review, the first performing ensemble in African American music for which students received academic credit. One of the recordings she produced with the ensemble, Music is Just a Party, was selected by Billboard in 1977 as the top single pick in its first time around category. On that recording, she showed her talent as a performer, composer, director, and artist in African American music. Maltsby has excelled as an author and editor. Her landmark book, co-edited with Melanie Burnham, African American Music and Introduction, is the staple source that the world consults on African American music. The second revised and expanded edition is soon to be published. She has also co-edited the African American section of the United States and Canada Garland Encyclopedia of World Music. She has written articles on funk, rhythm and blues, gospel, the evolution of African American music, ethnicity, and African American popular music, African influences and retentions, Negro spirituals, and the African American popular music industry. Her most recent work ventured into ethnographic research of gospel choirs in the Netherlands. Maltsby contributes scholarship in multimedia. She has worked prodigiously in film, most significantly serving as a music researcher and consulting scholar for the award-winning PBS series Eyes on the Prize, which I remember watching growing up. Wade in the Water and Chicago's Record Row, the cradle of rhythm and blues. She is frequently called upon for building music installations at major museums around the United States, and legal experts have called on her forensic ethnomusicology talents for expert testimony in music. She has pioneered the use of technology in the classroom, leading the building of instructional websites on the history of Black music and hip hop. One of her courses focused on music in museums, and she has helped train students for work in public sector museums. Maltsby was awarded an honorary doctorate by Benedictine College, and from IU, she received the Distinguished Faculty Award of the College of Arts and Sciences, the Distinguished Scholar Award from the Office of Women's Affairs, and the President's Medal. She was also chosen to deliver the Society for Ethnomusicology Seeger Lecture in 2012. Portia K. Maltsby has retired after a distinguished career of research, teaching, and service that has benefited Indiana University and a host of students who are now professionals in ethnomusicology and African American music. And I want to say once again, in many ways, you are the embodiment of what Cooper says is that when and where I enter. And I celebrate you and salute you on this auspicious occasion. Congratulations, Dr. Maltsby.
It's wonderful to see everyone after it's been like, what, 2 or 3 years now that I've left. I'm not beyond more than 3 years ago, but I've been back within the last 2 or 3 years. And I just want to say that it was at Indiana University that I was able to, given the time period when I arrived, to engage in all of my interests, from performance to scholarship to community, and And then, of course, when I moved over to folklore ethno in 2000, that was another wonderful experience, and in particular with, at that time, the real diversity of the ethnomusicology program. And I just have great memories of describing the ideas and changes that I had with my colleagues. And I just, in ending, say thank you very much. And IU ended up being a very good fit for me and my interest in with the colleagues that I developed there. So it's good seeing all of you again. And thank you for hosting this event and celebrating my honor. Thank you, Alisha, for that wonderful intro. And I do remember when I met you. Yes, I do.
Thank you, Portia. For anyone interested in the history of Black music research or in the history of Black music research here at Indiana University, Dr. Maltsby's two-part podcast on sound lore, where she is interviewed by Dr. Jones, is required listening. And in fact, anyone wanting to know what the answer is to diversifying and decolonizing this campus should only look back 50 years when Dr. Maltsby was brought here, and among many other faculty. So I just put that out there for anyone interested. Dr. Maltsby's story is essential for understanding not only ethnomusicology, but how ethnomusicology needs to develop and grow in the future.
Thank you, David.
So our next recipient is Dr. Bruno Nettl. And as many of us are familiar with his work, unfortunately, Bruno passed away last year. And so receiving the medal in his honor is his grandson, Dr. Stefan Fiol, who is a professor of ethnomusicology at the University of Cincinnati in their world-renowned Conservatory of Music. Dr. Fiol is also a good buddy of mine, and he was gracious enough to join us today so that we might have a member of Bruno's family with us to help celebrate his great achievements. I have a few short remarks that I would like to say about Bruno, as he was one of my teachers at the University of Illinois. Many of us are familiar with Bruno, mostly from his prodigious work in ethnomusicology, but few know of his roots here in Bloomington. Bruno was born in Prague in 1930 to Paul and Gertrude, and the family fled Nazi Germany in 1939. Bruno was just 9 years old when he was brought here to the US. Surprisingly enough, he was brought here by a number of professors who had created opportunities for Jewish scholars to find work here in the States to escape Nazi Germany. Bruno's family was settled here in Bloomington, Indiana, where his father, Paul, served as professor of historical musicology in our School of Music. Bruno was raised here. He attended University High School, which is now where the Jacobs School of Music is currently housed, used to be University High School. Bruno pursued his music studies here at IU, completing the PhD in 1953 under the tutelage of Dr. George Herzog. While here at IU, Bruno served as one of the first graduate assistants at the Archive of Traditional Music. So for all of our many students who have spent time in the ATM, you are not alone, and that's a lineage that goes back all the way to the 1940s, where Bruno served as a GA there. He did this work focusing on music, folklore, linguistics, and anthropology, and his dissertation on the musical practices of the Blackfoot people of Montana marked the first ever doctorate awarded in a field that was only then becoming known as ethnomusicology. Upon his graduation, Bruno began his career as a music librarian at Wayne State University, and then later assumed a professorship at the University of Illinois, Urbana-Champaign, where he founded its ethnomusicology program in 1964 and remained there on faculty pretty much until his death in 2020. As a scholar, teacher, and friend and colleague, I find it difficult to overstate Bruno's significance in ethnomusicology. He is the author and editor of 36 books and 137 peer-reviewed articles. His research encompassed Native American, Persian, South Indian, Central European, and North American musical communities. His most recent research contributions involved historicizing ethnomusicology from its early origins to the present day. And that's perhaps where his impact was most widely felt, is in his many published histories of the field. It would seem impossible for any student of ethnomusicology to not encounter his work. In fact, his 29 issues and concepts, originally published in the early 1980s, and through subsequent revisions and new editions, still remains one of the most important histories of ethnomusicology that pretty much every graduate student encounters. Bruno was active in the Society of Ethnomusicology, serving as its president from 1969 to 1971, and twice as editor of the journal Ethnomusicology, the first term from 1962 to 66, and the second term from 1999 to 2002. He once told me how in his first term, he was way too young to be editor of the journal. And in his second term, he felt he was way too old to be editor of the journal. While at the University of Illinois, Bruno supervised and mentored an entire generation of ethnomusicologists, working diligently and passionately to spread the discipline to music schools across North America. He would often tell us that it was his life goal to make sure that every music program had an ethnomusicologist in it. And to be honest, he's responsible for much of the expansion of the field in the 1970s and 1980s. Bruno's writing was unmistakable. He was accessible, clear, disarming, yet academically rigorous. He had a talent for breaking down complex theoretical concepts into their most basic elementary features. I remember in many of his seminars, we would show up with fresh new ideas, and he would often very quickly remind us that someone else had thought of that 30 years earlier. He had that kind of command of the history of the field and was quick to tell us that the first ethnomusicologists were in many ways way far ahead than the ones that he was training. Bruno's research also expressed a sincere desire to connect humanity through its musical beliefs and practices. He took a similar approach to his teaching and mentorship. He was always accessible, he was always disarming and academically rigorous at the same time. He was that professor whose door was always open and always welcome to people stopping by. He founded the Society for Gastromusicology with delicious meetings at his home each fall semester. Every participant was asked to read a paper, which involved bringing a dish from around the world and then describing the dish and its cultural context. He loved writing poetry and plays in the form of double dactyls and palindromes. He once wrote an entire one-act play entirely in palindromes. It's not very good, but it is definitely interesting. And he would often hide these plays and poems in the University of Illinois Ethnomusicology Library reserves. And then we would often find them, not realizing they were there. He taught each class with this same 1980s era cassette tape player. And he would, in class, he became notorious for playing his cassette tape. And then after he was done, he would, while it was still playing, press fast forward, which would create this really high-pitched screeching sound until the next track began. So he became known for that high-pitched screeching sound. That was his marker. He was kind, he was funny, generous, and always available for his students, even those like myself who were often perhaps too petulant for his taste. His love for Indiana University and our department endured throughout his life. When I was hired here in 2008, Bruno sent me a personal note celebrating that one of his advisees, one of his students, would be here at his alma mater. And based on that, he would often tell me stories of his life in Bloomington. His family home was right on the corner of 2nd and Mitchell. He met his lovely wife, Wanda, here, who was a native of Columbus, Indiana. And he courted her at the Rose Well House, telling me local student folklore about that Rose Well House and what happens when you kiss your sweetheart there at midnight on Valentine's Day. He took great pride in being a member of the Indiana University alumni. And even spent, even in his failing health, returned here to Bloomington for what would be his last annual SCM meeting in 2019. Perhaps another thing that I just remembered, a lot like our colleague Henry Glassie, Bruno Nettl is the only ethnomusicologist so far to be awarded with the ACLS Haskins Prize. Something worth recognizing for sure, that Bruno Nettl's contributions to the field of ethnomusicology and making it a core component of a music performance, musicology, and music education curriculum are very important to our field. I can't think of another alumnus of our department, present company excluded, more deserving of the IU Bicentennial Medal.
Yep.
Stefan, you're with us right now. Is there anything you'd like to say?
Just thank you for those words, David. I'm just really honored to be able to accept this on behalf of Bruno, and along with Wanda, his wife of 70 plus years, his two daughters, Gloria and Becky, three grandchildren, and 4 great-grandchildren. So just thank you very much. I know if Bruno were here, he would say something about his teachers and all the people that allowed him to do this great work over his career. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Stefan. I appreciate you coming with us today. Okay, our next recipient is Dr. Ruth Stone, also legend in ethnomusicology and West African research, former chair of the department, former vice provost of this university, former president of SEM. She will be introduced by our own Dr. Daniel Reed.
Thank you, Dave, and thank you for the opportunity to speak at this wonderful event, honoring so many of our great colleagues and their accomplishments. As many of you probably know, I was a student of Ruth's long ago before it then became a colleague of hers, and I still recall when I came for my visit to this campus when I was contemplating studying here, and going to her office in Morrison Hall and sitting with her. I was so nervous, but she was really good at putting me at ease, and I was trying to get a sense of what what she was looking for in a prospective student. And she said to me something I'll never forget, which was, we want people to come here who don't just replicate what we do, but have their own ideas and chart new ground. And that, I think, is something that I can really say is true of her. She has seen so many students through her office in this program, and who have gone out and populated ethnomusicology and related work positions literally throughout the world. So it's a great honor to speak briefly on her behalf, and it will be very brief compared with what I could do. But the IU Bicentennial Medal is awarded, as you've already heard, to individuals who have broadened the reach of Indiana University around the state, nation, and world, and have helped put IU on the map in unique ways. In research, through teaching, and in service, Ruth M Stone epitomizes this award criteria. Among the most influential ethnomusicologists of her generation, Ruth played a leading role both in her home discipline of ethnomusicology, but also in African studies during the 36-year career that she worked here on the faculty at IU, and she continues to do so to this day. First and most fundamentally, Ruth began in the early 1980s, broadening the reach of IU by broadening and deepening ethnomusicological theory and method. What distinguishes Ruth's ethnographic work is its elegant fusion of Western theoretical models, especially phenomenology, for which she's recognized as the first ethnomusicologist to engage in that school of thought and work, and it's been quite influential. And deeply grounded Pele concepts based in careful analysis of Pele language terms. Ruth is also lauded, along with her husband, Berlin, who's here today, for the method she used to produce these rich analyses, the feedback interview, in which the researcher watches and co-interprets a videotape performance event with participants recording the interview as well for later analysis. I know Ruth is particularly proud also of the later article that she wrote with her daughter, Angela Stone McDonald, who is here with us today as well. So, on the feedback interview in retrospective sense of the multiple disciplines in which people have used that method for research in Africa and elsewhere. Ruth has continued throughout her career to produce standard-setting scholarship, from those ethnographic monographs in the early 1980s to her landmark Theory for Ethnomusicology in 2007, and then, most recently, its second edition, a revamped co-edited volume with her former student, Harry Berger, published just 2 years ago. Ruth's editorial work alone, from her Garland Encyclopedia and Handbooks of African Music, her guest editorship of journals from African Today to the Liberian Studies Journal, has galvanized new directions in research for decades. In all, she has thus far published 12 books and more than 80 articles, book chapters, and other writings. But a portrayal of Ruth's role in extending IU's reach around the state, nation, and world would be remiss if it did not highlight her tireless commitment to mentoring graduate students. She has chaired more than 75 dissertation committees, including mine, and served as a member on many more. And her former students have occupied positions and continue to do so at major academic institutions literally all over the world, from Boulder, Colorado, to the Eastern Cape of South Africa, from East Lansing, Michigan, to Muscat, Oman. Ruth Stone's support for her students is lifelong, and her mentorship continues to this day for all of us who are lucky enough to consider us having that relationship with her. Ruth's commitment to professional service is no less passionate, and she has translated this belief into institution building action throughout her career, making enormous contributions to her home institution and the broader world communities it serves. Highlights of her service include a term as president of the Society for Ethnomusicology from 1995 to 1997, and co-founding the Evia Digital Archive, starting in 2000 to the present, an enormous online repository of ethnographic video. Here at Indiana University, Ruth's many administrative appointments have included terms as chair of our department from 1995 to 1999, and again from 2003 to 2005, director of the Archives of Traditional Music from 1988 to 95, and again from 2000 to 2001, and associate vice provost for research from 2007 to 2014. In this latter role, Ruth planted the seeds and nurtured the early growth of what would become the Media Digitization and Preservation Initiative, the $15 million groundbreaking effort to digitally preserve the entire media holdings of the IUB campus. Ruth has received many awards and grants in support of her research and service, including multiple awards from Fulbright Hayes, the NEH, Social Sciences Research Council, the Mellon Foundation. In 2013, in recognition of the extraordinary service to the society and the field of ethnomusicology, Ruth was named an honorary member of the Society for Ethnomusicology. And then more recently, she also has been had an award created in her name by the Society for Ethnomusicology. The Ruth Stone Prize is awarded annually to recognize the most distinguished English language monograph in the field of ethnomusicology, published as the author's first monograph. Then in 2014, Ruth was awarded the Provost Medal, the highest honor bestowed by the IU Office of the Provost in recognition of her contributions to the academic mission of Indiana University. So I consider it a high honor to be the one to formally recognize her in this context, this latest distinction in recognition of her great career, the Bicentennial Medal, to mark the extraordinary contributions of my former professor, mentor, and colleague, and my forever friend, Ruth M Stone. Fortunately, she's still with us and active, so we do not have to yet begin saying, "How does it feel to be on our own without Ruth M Stone?" Thank you, Ruth.
Daniel, I can always count on a wonderful introduction. I hardly recognize the person you're talking about, but thank you for your kind words. And I'd just like to thank everybody from Indiana University and all of you for giving me the opportunity I've had all these years to explore, to create, to teach, and nurture people and projects while I've been at Indiana. I think Indiana University, drawing on the vision of Herman Wells, has long let us follow our dreams to build departments, majors, projects, and hubs of creativity. And so I'd like to thank each of you who has been part of that, the dreams that I've been able to follow. I'd like to acknowledge people like Richard Dorson, Alan Merriam, George List, Carlos Boile, Ronald Smith, Clara Henderson, and our recently departed Patrick O'Meara, who has worked with us during these past years. My hope is that we'll continue to follow our dreams, to build and study folklore and ethnomusicology, even as we keep the principles of working together as our guiding North Star. Thank you for the honor, which I accept on behalf of those with whom I've been privileged to work. And a special thanks to my family, Verlin, Angela, and Keith, who are all here today, who have generously shared in the life of the Academy with me and done so mostly cheerfully. Thank you.
Thank you, Ruth. Very well said. Our next recipient of the IU Bicentennial Medal is Dick Bauman, who is going to be introduced by Ray Cashman. And before you begin, Ray, if I could make one request, I've heard, I don't know how, countless times from alumnus of this department that Dick and Henry were called the rock star and the living legend. Could you tell me who was who? I've never been able to figure out who was who.
First I've ever heard of this, Dave. Sorry.
I don't believe you.
Am I on? Am I rolling? Are we ready? When I first met Dick Bauman, he scared the shit out of me. Oh, I'm sorry. That's the wrong draft. Hang on a second. That's not the right one. That's not what I want. Ah, damn it. I guess I'm committed to this one. Back in the spring of 1995, I think it was clear to me from Dick Bauman's prose seminar that he did not suffer fools. And I had a sneaking suspicion I might be one of them. Then again, if you don't start grad school with a healthy dose of imposter syndrome, you might neglect the rather crucial and ultimately beneficial insight that you still have a thing or two to learn. And clearly, here is a man from whom you can learn a thing or two. About the social semiotics of language, about the poetics and politics of performance, about the discursive construction of social realities, about the dynamics of continuity and innovation in the composition of texts and their adaptation and circulation and reception across space and through time, about, in short, in Dick's words, about the philology of the vernacular. Performance, genre, intertextuality, tradition. These are core issues in the study of our common humanity. Heady stuff. Only later might you appreciate that in addition to being a serious scholar, Dick Bauman might also just be a big softy and a bit of a goof. If you get him in the right mood, in the right context, if you, say, compliment his shirt, he'll coquettishly bat his eyelashes and purr, "Why, this old thing? I only wear this when I don't care how I look." Classic calibration of an intertextual gap through the ironic deployment of mimetic direct discourse rekeyed to subvert expectations and thereby elicit cachinnation. What he said was funny. Enough phatic talk. On with the praise poem. With apologies to previous praise poets on whose work I build, for our mouths are full of the words of others. Dick Bauman, distinguished professor emeritus, is an eclectic scholar with degrees in English, that from Michigan, BA, folklore, MA from Indiana, Anthropology, MS from University of Pennsylvania, and American Civilization, that PhD from University of Pennsylvania again. Dick's scholarly contributions have transcended conventional academic boundaries, while shaping and facilitating collaboration between folklore studies and anthropology, and linguistics, and semiotics, and speech communication, and history, and other fields. He's best known for his theoretical and methodological contributions to the ethnographic study of language and performance. And his most influential books include, these will be familiar to you, Verbal Art as Performance, 1977, Let Your Words Be Few, Symbolism of Speaking and Silence Among 17th Century Quakers, 1983, Story, Performance, and Event, Contextual Studies of Oral Narrative, 1986, Voices of Modernity, Language Ideologies and the Production of Social Inequality, that written with Charles Briggs in 2003. That one also won the Edward Sapir Prize from the Society for Linguistic Anthropology, and one that my most recent students will be familiar with, A World of Others' Words, Cross-Cultural Perspectives on Intertextuality, 2004. One thing to know is that over his academic career, Dick headed two of folklore's major programs, first as director of the Center for Intercultural Studies in Folklore and Ethnomusicology at the University of Texas, and later as chair, of course, here in the Department of Folklore and Ethnomusicology at Indiana. Being especially active in graduate education, Dick directed more than 60 PhD dissertations in a number of disciplines. And for this significant service on behalf of his students, I, for one, am quite grateful. He won the IU Distinguished Teaching and Mentoring Award of the University Graduate School. Among Dick's many professional activities, he served as president for several societies, including the Semiotic Society of America, Society for Linguistic Anthropology, Society of Fellows of the American Folklore Society. In addition, he chaired the Folklife Advisory Committee of the Smithsonian Institution, edited the Journal of American Folklore, and served as a member of more than 15 editorial boards. He has been a Guggenheim Fellow, a Fellow of the Center for Advanced Study in Behavioral Sciences, Folklore Fellow of the Finnish Academy of Sciences, and twice holder of the National Endowment for the Humanities Fellowship. In 2005, Dick received the Outstanding Folklore Achievement Award from the China Folklore Society. Followed quickly in 2008, he received the Lifetime Scholarly Achievement Award from the American Folklore Society. And in 2016, he received the Franz Boas Award for exemplary service to anthropology, granted by the American Anthropological Association. And here we are again today when we recognize and celebrate the fact that most recently, Dick Bauman has earned the IU Bicentennial Medal in recognition of his distinguished contributions to Indiana University. Felicidades, mi patron. Congrats.
First, thanks very much, Ray, for that generous and not altogether serious introduction. You didn't say anything about what a good fly fisherman I am or how formidable it is I am at the poker table, but we'll let that go for now. A few days ago, I received an email from John McDowell accompanying a photograph that had been sent to him by Dan Benamos of the 1962 Folklore Institute held at Indiana University, in which I was a participant. It was a moving experience to look at that photograph and identify or try to identify who my friends and colleagues were also pictured there. But standing in the front row was Stith Thompson, Edson Richmond was in the photo, Warren Roberts was in the photo, Dick Dorson was in the photo, Archer Taylor was there. And it made me think, in conjunction with this event, what a large chunk of that bicentennial history involved folklore at Indiana University, and how strong the continuities are across all those decades. My involvement in folklore at IU is something more than 60 years worth. But there were all our teachers and mentors who went back a good bit further. It's a really strong tradition. I'm proud to be part of it and grateful to be a recipient of this bicentennial medal. It's great to see you all, and I thank you for involving me.
Thank you, Dick. So we've come through our 7 recipients of these awards that we're talking about today. I am astounded by the achievements and accomplishments that we've only briefly touched upon with each of our recipients. If anything, the history of folklore and ethnomusicology at Indiana University has been stellar, leaving us with an incredible obligation to not only preserve that history, but to continue it. If being Friday, and it is now after 5 p.m., if you have a cocktail or a drink with you, let's take a moment to salute our recipients of these awards, showing them our appreciation and letting them know that their contributions to this university are well appreciated and will continue to the future. To you all, I say Slan Shiva. Thank you so much. Congratulations.